Sounds great.
Hi, welcome everyone to our all-in virtual workshop for local historical societies. We're excited to have you here today. My name is Eileen Corcoran. I'm the Director of Service and Outreach, and I will be doing some of the tech pieces today. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom, but as always, if you have any questions or you need any assistance, definitely feel free to use the chat. We will have time at the end for questions. And then the other good thing, we have a decent crowd here today, is the raise hand function is also really useful as well. And with that, I'm going to start sort of a screen share and then hand it over to my colleague, Meg. So let me get this going. And then we will. Mm-mm. All right, Meg, can you confirm that you can see that slide?
I can see the slide. Thank you so much.
You're
So
welcome.
this is very exciting. Welcome to this rather sizable group to our very first introduction to the All in Vermont Put Your History on the Map project. It's been cooking in the background for a while now, but we're really excited to have it now here on the forefront. So I'm going to have you just move to the next slide, please. So Eileen already introduced herself, and many of you know her already. But if you do not know me, my name is Meg Mallory. I am the outreach educator here at the Vermont Historical Society, and we just wanted to welcome you again and thank you so much for joining us. So we'll just dive right in. Most of you, if not all of you, are community historians who are passionate about preserving local history. And local historical societies play a super critical role in preserving community memory. Yet many students grow up across our state without ever engaging with the history that surrounds them. So here, the All in Vermont project gives young people the chance to research their town, explore original materials, and publish their findings on a statewide map. And today's session will focus on how you all can help as history partners in connecting students with the resources and expertise that you already possess. So we're just going to move on to the next slide. And I'll just begin with sort of this first common goal that I think all educators share, which is to nurture historically literate students, young people who not only grasp the broad arcs of history, but also understand how those events continue to shape the world around them. And I want to just mention here, it's important that we are acknowledging our funders. And this project is a grant-funded project by the U.S. National Park Service with the Lake Champlain Basin Program. So the next slide goes over an agenda that we have. We sort of broke it down into sections. And so the first, we're going to talk about the semi-quincentennial, which is America's 250th, which some individuals are already beginning to celebrate or to commemorate across the state. And then we move more into that in 2026 and 2027. I'm really sorry if you hear any sounds, just as a side note. We have a lot of work happening at the Vermont History Center outside. And so if there's any construction noise, my apologies. The second part that we will be going over is the Vermont Education Overview. And this sort of is a deeper dive into sort of some of the components that are related to history specifically. And then we're going to talk about local history partnerships in relationship to the All in Vermont project. And the number 4 All in Vermont project is going to sort of be a more detailed view. And then we're going to talk a bit about student research, and then we're going to wrap up our presentation with some questions and discussion. Because this really is designed to be a partnership, we really are going to be seeking your feedback. And in some ways, though we will be publishing a guide that we will be sending out, we'll also have an online version that will be a sort of a living document and change as necessary. So your feedback will be really important. So on to the next slide, we'll talk about America's 250th or semi-quincentennial. So the American Revolutionary era changed North America and the world in some pretty profound ways. And this is a time for Americans to learn about our past, celebrate our successes in freedom and bravery, and think about the times we've faced and continue to face unfairness, racism, and violence. So this is a once in a lifetime event and a chance to examine our whole history and work towards strengthening our communities and in turn working towards improving our world. The upcoming 250th anniversary of the United States encourages all of us to reflect not just on national milestones, but on the local experiences that shaped our towns. Vermont's communities have stories of independence, protest, resilience, industry, migration, and civic participation. The All In project ties directly into this moment by helping students explore how the national themes like democracy, fairness, and belonging played out right here at home. You may or may not be familiar with these 5 themes, but the AASLH put them out. And the Vermont Historical Society has adopted these moving into the 250th. And so we're really asking students to look at how their local history ties to these 5 larger themes. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about just some broad scope educational shifts that Vermont has seen in history in the last 10 years. So as a field, we just know that approaches to education are always shifting. So as you may or may not know, Vermont has seen quite a bit of change over the last decade. And social studies teaching in Vermont has moved away from what many of us grew up with, which was textbook instruction tied to specific grade level content standards. And instead, the state adopted the C3 framework, which emphasizes practices like question-driven inquiry and evaluating sources and evidence-based arguments. And that shift sort of pushed districts and teachers to design inquiries and projects instead of matching, instead of having tests on lots of like discrete content items in those bubble tests that we're so familiar with. And at the same time, Vermont continued its statewide move towards proficiency-based learning and flexible pathways. This is tied to Act 77. And that policy encouraged social studies to be taught as performance-based competencies. So students are demonstrating skills through things like projects and portfolios and assessments instead of these summative tests. And this reinforced a move to covering content to accessing disciplinary thinking and more broad civic skills. And many Vermont schools reorganized their schedules and course titles so that history and social studies and ELA are taught and integrated into more of a broad humanities. This is especially true in middle school and late elementary school. And that structure supports longer, richer inquiry projects involving research, argumentation, writing, and public presentation. So the All in Vermont project was really designed with all of these shifts in mind. So if we move on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the C3 framework. The C3 framework is the shortened way to say the college, career, and civic life framework for the social studies state standards. They were launched in 2013, and many states across the country have used this one document as a guiding document for their own state standards. But Vermont is the only state that uses the C3 framework as its complete set of social studies standards. And that's an important thing to note. And one important aspect also to note is that students begin with questions rather than answers. So they gather sources, they evaluate reliability, and ultimately communicate their findings. So when students work with local archives, interview community members, or explore historic buildings, they are practicing exactly the kind of thinking that the C3 standards require. So we're going to move on to the next slide. and talk a little bit about place-based learning. So research shows that grounding learning in local contexts strengthens student identity, belonging, and civic agency, and can even improve academic outcomes such as persistence and performance. And because students are studying the places and the people that shape their everyday lives, the local contribution becomes really genuine and authentic. And they're not learning about history in some sort of wide abstract that doesn't make a lot of sense to them, but instead they are grounding it in a lens of their own town and landscapes and communities, so it's relevant. And this grounding creates meaning, making the learning experience more immediate, personal, and impactful. And now we're going to talk a little bit about project-based learning. So research also consistently shows that the project-based learning increases engagement, deepens understanding, and can also lead to meaningful contributions to the local community as a whole. So when students are grappling with real questions that they're creating and wrestling with, supported by research and community partnerships, their sense of purpose rises and their academic growth can follow. So the structure of project-based learning encourages sort of more iterative thinking, collaboration, and creative production, allowing students to develop both disciplinary skills and real-world competencies. On the next slide, we talk about All in Vermont, and this really is a project for all people and all of Vermont's communities. And it's also a place where all of these things join together. So not only place-based learning, but project-based learning, and it's in alignment with the C3 framework. And I just want to mention teachers are so spread thin these days that it really is important in order to sort of encourage participation that they understand the connection to the standards and to this specifically because they're going to be dedicating a portion of their learning time in their classrooms towards it. And if they're trying to make the case for participation with their administrators, that's really helpful. So the All in Vermont project is designed for all people and all Vermont communities, celebrating the shared stories that make each place unique. And by connecting local historians, cultural organizations, and community history keepers with educators and students, the project helps ensure that Vermont's history is shared by those who know and appreciate it best. These partnerships foster a deep understanding of place, strengthen community pride, and help young people see themselves as a part of Vermont's ongoing history and story. And this sort of connects to one of the themes that's about doing history. The students really become a part of it. The All in Vermont project is an invitation for all K-12 students across the state to research their community and contribute to this shared public map, which will be hosted on both websites, the Vermont Historical Society, with its main home being on Vermont History Explorer. I do want to mention that there have been a lot of questions about college-age students and how they may be able to get involved.
Right, I can put
And,
headphones on in a minute, but I'm going to
and
finish.
one of the ways that they can get involved is to act as a history partner, especially if they're studying history. So instead of producing something that lives on the site themselves, they can be a partner. Every community, large or small, has a story worth telling, and the Vermont Historical Society is acting as a steward in capturing and sharing these stories. But the meat of the work would not be possible without all of you who are here today. So that kind of moves into the roles of historical societies. I was wondering, should we pause here? Does anybody have any questions of this moment, or should we just continue? Okay, let's continue. So local historical societies really are the backbone of this project. You help to keep historical sources and materials safe. The ledgers and photographs and artifacts and diaries and maps and postcards, all of the collection items in your possession don't exist anywhere else. And for students encountering these items, they can experience sparked curiosity, and we really want to capitalize on that. And objects in particular do a great job of doing that. For educators, having a local expert helps make history accessible, especially because there isn't an emphasis on content standards. A lot of teachers may not be emphasizing history, especially in the lowest grades. So your knowledge and your expertise is going to be really crucial. So even just providing a few digitized photos or objects can give students enough material to build a complete all-in Vermont project. On the next slide, we talk about how you can support all levels by offering age-appropriate materials and stories. So I think another really critical takeaway is that this all-in Vermont project, it has a little bit of a choose your own adventure feel. We understand in developing a project structure that will work for a first grade class and also an 11th grade class needs to have some flexibility in the structure. So teachers will adjust research expectations depending on age. And we are really going to be asking our educators to identify the needs of their class and be able to communicate those to you specifically so that you can gather the materials that will be useful. Younger students might describe what they see in a photograph or draw a historic building, and maybe even just write a caption because they're just learning how to write complete sentences. Older students can compare sources and analyze bias and connect events to even broader themes. And high school students may conduct interviews and build arguments. So as this might be the first time that an educator is communicating with a local historical society, I would say just be prepared to ask and answer a lot of questions. And this is in both directions to drill down where there might be an area of focus. And to help orient you to the types of work that children do in K-12 education, in the LHS guide, which is now on the website, which we have a link later in the presentation, there are 4 informational charts available that highlight the C3 standard skills that students are working on and practicing in different grade bands. So each page will be dedicated to an age band, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9 through 12. And there will be examples of not only the skills and how they tie to the standards, but then also local history activity examples, just general, as well as topics that may work best for different age groups for the All-In project specifically. So on the next slide, the next 2 talk about ways in which you can partner, I suppose, with schools and educators. So when you're partnering with a school, I think the most important thing to remember is to schedule in advance. Scheduling classrooms or school visits allows your organization to gather materials and coordinate appropriate amounts of volunteers or staff and ensure that the experience is as meaningful for the students and educators than it can be. So planning ahead of time sets everyone up for this smooth, successful program. And there's 2 different ways to do that. You can host a visit on site, or you can go into a classroom. And when you're preparing to host a K-12 field trip at your local historical society, there are lots of logistical, safety, and educational considerations to ensure a smooth and productive visit. So when students visit your site, a little planning makes the experience smooth and engaging because you're thinking about space and group size and restroom access or how students will move through displays. And stations work well. So one group might look at a grouping of photos and another at objects and then maybe a third at maps or documents, and then you can rotate through. There should be some clear handling rules put in place so that you can allow students to interact with history closely while still keeping your collection safe. And most visits run well on like usually when it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And for young groups, making those sessions into maybe smaller focused 20-minute bites would help keep them engaged. I will say that there are some sample emails that exist in the guide to also reach out, to have some initial reach out to different schools and who you might do that with within a school community. And on the second, on like the flip side, if you can't host people, you can go to a school and have a visit. And it might be the most effective way for students to access local history by having a historian visit the school instead. And in many communities, scheduling and specifically transportation present real barriers because buses may not be available, or they're too costly, or they are needed for other routes, or educators may have limited flexibility in their daily schedules, or maybe, truthfully, your local historical society just isn't designed to hold 30 kids at one time. So reproduction artifacts, printed documents, digital folders, or even some mobile museum kits may allow students to participate in a different way. And this model supports teachers and reduces barriers and ensures that all learners have access to their local history. So the LHS guide goes into depth about all of these different bullet points and can help you decide as an LHS what you may be able to provide. On the next slide, we're talking a little bit more specifically about handling collections. Around the comfort of the objects themselves, how you may set clear expectations. And I'm saying consequences sort of quietly, because I think what I'm really meaning is that when you set clear expectations, you are creating a space where there's a lot of understanding. And part of that understanding is what happens if your expectation isn't followed. And then also maybe some alternatives. So as you know, original materials are irreplaceable and many of them are super fragile. So we always want to explicitly model what safe handling looks like. And we should explain, because kids really want to know why they can or cannot handle something. Explain why certain items stay in protective sleeves or cases and why students may have to use gloves or to support something with two hands before they begin interacting with materials. You may even send something out to the teacher ahead of time. Expectations should always be made clear from the start, and especially with young students who, like I said before, will have to explain what will happen if the expectations are not met. And I kind of have an example. So after explaining object handling and expectations, I may say, for the safety of this collection, if an object is handled or handled improperly, you will no longer be able to handle the object. Instead, you will have the option to observe with your eyes only. If you are unable to do that, then we may have to remove the item completely. Does everyone understand? Are there any questions? So I've found, I used to work with first graders in particular, and you do have to be almost like a step-by-step, very clear. An alternative may include students working hands-on with reproductions or digital copies. That's always an option because it keeps the originals out of harm's way. And I think kind of a cool secondary layer to this is not only are they interacting with primary sources in a really personal way, and that sparks curiosity, but you're also teaching these skills and showing them that history actually requires stewardship and that they get to be a part of that stewardship. I've been talking for a little while now, so I was wondering maybe if we could open up the floor a little bit and try an activity example. And this is just using an object from the Vermont Historical Society. And I think that by practicing this close looking exercise, we may be able to experience the kind of learning that students will do. And so this is sort of a close looking exercise that comes in four parts, but the first three are all emphasizing observation. And so I want to invite you to take a first look and observe this object closely for, let's say, 15 seconds. You might see some squiggly kids. But this first line of questioning that I'm going to open up is really just about observing the object itself. And I'm really going to open it up. I hope that someone is brave enough to participate. But it says, what shapes, lines, or patterns do you see on this object? Or what materials do you think this object is made of? I don't know if we have to, you might have to ask to unmute.
It looks like wood.
How, why do you think it's wood?
The color and well, I can't feel it, of course, but the color and the structural look of it, and I'm looking at the little, is it not dovetail, but the way it's put together with pegs, it looks like, or
Those are great first observations. You might be making that connection because of the joins in the corner. And I think
yes.
about the joins that I see in the wooden bureau that I have at my house, for instance. So that was a really great observation. And you might ask kids to describe this. Obviously, it's hard when it's a picture like this without anything next to it to show its size, relative size, but you could talk about its size and its texture and its condition. Looks like it's a little worn. Someone might notice that there are acorns, but might not know what that third image is. That might spark a conversation. And then that would be the first line of questions. It's just, what do you see? And now I want you to take a second look and answer what may have this been created for? So what is its purpose? And obviously some of you might actually know. But what do you think it's made for? And what does the carved design mean? Does anyone have an idea? Who may have used this?
Well, it's very decorative. And it looks like the pieces that are decorated can be removed or interchanged in some way. Looks like they come in and out of the little frame that's holding them.
Oh, look at that. I think you might be onto something. It does look like there are parts that can be removed. They are highly decorative. And I wonder what this might be used for. In this case, it looks like it might be, we could say it's a stamp or a symbol. And yes, it is. It's made for butter. And who may have used this object? It could be a family, a business, or a community. Do you think a family would go through the effort of all of this? Or do you think it has a different purpose or a wider purpose?
I wonder if, well, somebody said it used for butter, which I agree with, that it might be a butter mold, because I have one that's a little different than this one. And because of the decorative element of it, perhaps it was used in like an inn or in some commercial way where they really wanted the butter to be very attractive.
Yeah, there may be that you may be onto something
Mhm. It
with
looks
having
too,
it be.
it looks like so much care and detail work that it doesn't it look like it would be in a home of a wealthier person or an establishment or an inn or it wouldn't be way out in the country in a log cabin with rough tools. I mean, there were some very fine tools used to etch that into the wood, but I'm not sure.
True. I'm purposely not giving too much away right now because I want to get to the third line of questioning. But I think because it is decorative, you are right. It likely has a purpose outside of a home, especially because it takes so much time. And when this may be used, I'm not imagining that would be a good use of time to do something so decorative when you have so many other tasks that you have to attend to. So this third look or the deeper dive asks for a little bit more interpretation. So if we're thinking about that it may be it's for butter, it's a mold, it's decorative, it's sectioned. How does this object connect to maybe craftsmanship or trade, or what skills may have been involved in using it or making it? Or does this say anything about the agricultural economy in the 1800s? Those might be some questions that dive at some deeper investigation or thinking or wondering. Does anyone want to add anything here, or should I continue?
So because it's joined in such a way that it's dovetailed on the corners, it might have taken somebody with a little more skill to make this particular piece, whereas somebody with, I mean, they were used in farms all over. So somebody who didn't have that dovetail experience would have just nailed or stapled the pieces together. It looks like it doesn't get to be removed, maybe. The outside pieces that you would, whatever you put in, were pressing into this mold, you'd have to turn upside down and pat out. Like maybe the bottom of it moves and you can push it from the bottom out.
Well,
These are all
why
these
could
are all
it, why isn't it made by a craftsperson and then sold to people to use?
This is true.
Mhm.
Because the dovetails would be pretty high level carpentry.
So these are all great questions and wonderings and observations, because actually you're nailing something. Molds were often actually carved locally, or they were purchased from itinerant woodworkers. And many families prided themselves on having their own unique stamp that could be recognized not only by their neighbors, but also in a marketplace. It sort of was an initial brand for their butter, especially if they were selling it in their community. Um, and it may have been a signal of quality, or maybe even having those super decorative stamps. It could have added value to the butter itself. And so this is just an example of how one object that I'm not sure who mentioned it, but they were pretty commonplace at one point. How this one object that may be found in many of your local historical societies can attach to lots of different forms of thinking. And I think the most important and maybe wrap up part of this close looking exercise is asking some questions like, what do you still wonder? And how many molds do you think a household would own? Or just trying to help guide students to ask more questions, because that leads to the inquiry part and connects to the C3 framework. And when they begin to ask more questions, they can start to focus maybe on a topic that they want to research more deeply. It also, honestly, I think it demonstrates that we don't actually need to lecture to students. We can just guide some of this conversation. We can plunk some of these things in front of them, and they, as long as we have a background and understanding about them, that they can explore using this authentic object. And they feel like they're doing some of their guides in their own learning.
Hmm.
That's a great question. I don't know. That is a good wondering. I just had to teach an 8-year-old that she couldn't put an iPad on top of a wood stove, so you never know. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about, thank you, by the way, for participating in that. I know it's sometimes awkward over
No.
Zoom, but I really appreciate you doing that. Now I just wanted to talk a little bit about ArcGIS, and some of you might have familiarity with it, but this is the mapping platform that we're going to use. So ArcGIS is a widely used geographic information system, GIS software platform. It's run by Esri, and it allows users to collect, map, analyze, and visualize spatial data. And it's really the digital backbone behind many interactive maps that you see on government websites or like connected to environmental studies or public health. And it's also now used in education more prominently. And the next slide talks a little bit about a portion of ArcGIS called Story Maps. And it is a web-based storytelling tool that's built into the platform. So instead of just showing a static map, we're going to be using story maps, and it allows users like students to explain why a place matters by layering spatial data with photos, videos, timelines, and descriptions. So there will be a large Vermont map, and then on that map, we can place a number of different student research stories that then the public can just go online to this map and hover over with a mouse and click on a region or an area that they would like to learn more about and pull up all of these stories. So it's used to share community history, environmental changes, and field research in this really public-friendly format. And it's used increasingly in classrooms all over the country. They talked a lot about it at the National Council for the Social Studies conference last year. And it just is super user-friendly. And as the project grows, each town will have a point on a map. And then student research will be presented in a number of different ways, which brings us back to this whole like choose your own adventure idea. So educators will have access to 6 different features, and each has a template that students will have available at their fingertips. And then each educator can design a project in a way that is best for their students. And they may just offer one template. Like if you were in a lower elementary school grade, you may just have one template that has a portion for an image and then maybe a sentence to describe it. Or maybe the teacher decides that students can access all of these features and build out a much larger entry. And once they fill these all out, they can compile one entry to be submitted to VHS, and then we will be responsible for inputting the data into Story Maps itself. So I think it's important for you to sort of be introduced to some of the features so you know what is available. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a timeline, pretty self-explanatory. It's best when used when students are exploring historical events in some sort of chronological order, or showing how a person or place or thing or community changed over time. And it is really clear in terms of presentation, and it helps viewers understand the sequence of developments that shaped whatever the topic is that they chose. This is really popular in elementary school. We work in chronological order a lot, and it's it this format works especially well for histories of industries and major town events, community movements. And I think what would be really helpful is for local historians to help kids identify what the most major milestones are within maybe their personal story. Because otherwise they might get so detailed that they put 20 things on this timeline when maybe they can just actually narrow it down to the 5 most important bits. The next feature is called compare. I don't know if you can see in that photograph easily or well, but there's a little square button in the middle that has an arrow in both directions. And so that acts as like a slider. So you can slide it one way or the other way, and you can see the entire image. And the compare feature is ideal for showing change over time. So it could be a street, a building, a farm, a neighborhood. It's also great for sharing 2 different viewpoints, and that's what this example shows here. So students can pair 2 images or maps and highlight the differences. It can also be like a great before and after. I'm thinking specifically on, I live over in Fayston and I drive through Waitsfield often, and you can see the tree-lined streets. And I had just a question in my mind, like, did it always have tree-lined streets like this? And I was able to go to the Waitsfield Historical Society's digital collection and find out that yes, it actually looks similar. So you can support these projects by providing things like photographs or postcards or maps. And in this case, this student was talking about women's suffrage in connection to St. Johnsbury Convention. And it was written about in 2 separate newspapers, and they accessed these 2 articles online, and they took screenshots of them, which is a little blurry, but I think it gets the point across. Another feature is called the sidecar feature, and it's great for providing background or context that helps explain a story. And in this case, this is an image of the architect of the second Vermont State House. And so this is his portrait, and then that goes along with the text. And I think that just helps to have the audience who's interacting with this experience a greater connection to him. He was. And it's most effective when the images are directly supporting the narrative. And honestly, it's a great learning for kids. If a picture doesn't help storytelling, then maybe it shouldn't be included at all, no matter how cool it is. So we're going to help them learn that too. The next feature is called the guided map feature, and this works best when students are exploring how a story might unfold over many areas. It could also be related to settlement patterns or migration or transportation routes. And each map point includes a short explanation. And in this case, this example is focused on the Peace Prize winner, Jody Williams. And it begins with where she was born and raised. And then it talks about her work in El Salvador. I think the next third point might be work associated with Washington, D.C. that she did. And then it goes back to Vermont, where she received her Peace Prize. So it's a way to just walk through different regions connected to stories. That might be one of the harder ones to integrate, but who knows? The next feature is an image gallery. And this will just help provide supporting context that helps to deepen the main story that the student is telling. And it's ideal for images that don't maybe drive the narrative, but help to give the narrative some context. So it maybe says something about the setting or people or tools or in the environment and how that connects to the larger topic. Again, I think that because kids will be so excited about interacting with all of your collections, they might just need help in editing it down into a smaller grouping. The final of the 6 is sort of grouped together because they're media related, but it's an audio or video clip. So if you have a student who is anxious to tell a story through actual voices or sounds, like oral histories, or maybe they're researching old time fiddle music and they want to highlight a fiddle song or local celebrations. And I don't know if there's a recording about, a band marching down the street. This is a way to integrate that to tell a more like a wider, more rich story. So students can incorporate short audio and video clips, and I want to emphasize short. That brings the past to life. And there are size limitations on the photographs that you don't have to worry about, but they might have to take a clip or edit down something larger into a clip. You can also link things like this Jack Jumper video selection was actually a collections video from Vermont Historical Society, and we could just put the link in and it pops up like that. So you can help students by accessing any recordings that you may have, or you could connect them with local community members that may be available for interviews that might enrich their story. And then, of course, you just want to provide any background about who may be speaking, and we want to make sure that we are presenting the material responsibly and getting credit always where credit is due. Does anybody have any questions about those sort of features?
Yeah, so Meg, just in general, I came in a few minutes late, and I imagine that this ArcGIS is just everybody's seeing it for the first time. So I'm curious about this is all contained on the VHS website under LHS resources, or how would I get back to these notes, for instance?
Thank you so much for asking. So we have an All in Vermont page on the Vermont History Explorer website, which is our kid-facing website, but it's also becoming an educator hub. It is its own tab, but you can also find it on the Vermont Historical Society website by going to the 250th page. And then you can click on All in Vermont and it will send you to that same page. On that page, there will be the local historical society guide, which is on there currently. And we also have a link at the end of the slideshow to show you. And then also, I don't think it's there right now, but we could actually just post it. But we could post the ArcGIS. There are 3 entries on it currently, and you could go in and sort of explore that and see those 3 stories that exist right now until it gets populated with many more stories. So there's 2 different ways to get there. And then this presentation right now is being recorded, and that will be available on YouTube too. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I'll just have to spend more time finding things. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And also, just as a side note, Eileen and I were chatting, and everybody who's attending this workshop today will be sent an actual physical copy of the guide, which is an LHS guide. And you should know that there's also an educator's guide, which is designed to approach this project from their viewpoint and with examples as to how to reach out to you. And thanks, Eileen, for putting that in the chat. And how to more in depth about the templates. And so it has different information than what is in your guide. Some of it's overlapping in the same, but it also has some differences. So if you ever wanted to poke around in that, that will be available on that same site next week. So ArcGIS has been around for a while. It just hasn't necessarily been something that we've been using specifically here at Vermont Historical Society outside of the LHS Finder map. But I just know that it feels new to education, probably within the last 5 years. But the government and environmental organizations and a whole bunch of other people have been using it for quite a while. Okay, so now we're on this slide, which you guys have been staring at for a while. We've moved a little bit into student research. And so I just wanted to mention that when students begin their research, they are going to rely on a wide range of local sources to build an accurate and compelling history of their town. And these sources include all of what you have in your collections and also other history partners like libraries, and maybe even museums that are in your area. And so many students will be encountering primary sources for the very first time. And some of their questions might be really basic, like who wrote this and when was it created and what does it show? And so your guidance is going to be really helpful in helping them to understand what they're looking at, and even more so maybe why it matters, and then how to use it responsibly. And even just a small selection of well-chosen items can anchor their entire project. And students really will be eager to sort of interact with these materials. So there is an entire section dedicated to this also in the LHS guide, and I really encourage you to take a longer gander at it. And if you have any questions, reach out. Just to touch on the submission guidelines, which is the next slide. I think it's really crucial that if your society provides any photographs or documents, that students are also practicing proper citation. And it helps ensure accuracy and ethical use, and it gives those who have worked so hard on it credit. And that includes you. So if something comes from you, we want them to say that it actually was courtesy of whatever your historical society is. So every completed student project will follow the same basic submission guidelines. Templates will keep all of the entries consistent. And I do want to mention also, just so that you have an awareness, that even let's just say a school of 3 classes participate and there are all of those students who have built a project, we're asking that educators submit to us one final project from each classroom or each grade initially. And then we will collect others sort of in our own little repository, and we will start to share those as we can. But we're prioritizing one per grade or per class to ensure statewide representation. So once we get sort of these populated stories from all over, then we'll continue to fill it in from all of the schools who've participated, because we want students to feel like their work matters. And then really, we just have one last slide, which is talking about sort of the community benefit. The impact of this project goes beyond classrooms. So when students engage with your collections, they are going to bring family members back to visit, hopefully. And then communities become more aware of all of the work that you're doing. And you might even end up getting a few more volunteers. Who knows? So over time, these students become, voters and volunteers and board members and donors. And the All in Vermont project hopefully will help to build the next generation of history advocates who will help preserve local memory long after we are gone. And so we're really thrilled that you're here and that you potentially want to be a part of it. On the next slide is just a thank you for being here for this first dip into the All In Vermont project. Thank you for your time today and all that you are doing to preserve Vermont's history. And it's true that local collections, no matter their size, are invaluable because without them, irreplaceable stories would be lost. And we really want to have students access this real personal history that's rooted in their own communities. And it's a real beautiful moment potentially to engage with learning across just generations, which I think is important too. So this is a moment to sort of open it up to the floor for any questions or discussions. This is the same link that Eileen dropped in the chat. And this is the online introduction. We are also going to have and offer an in-person workshop. And though much of the content may be the same, it's also an opportunity because it will be longer in length to think about your specific collections and to dig more deeply into how your collections may be used at different and various age groups. Have I reached out to schools yet? So awesome that you asked that question. So I have initially done some outreach to certain curricular directors, and we are going to release information about the Educator's Guide in an educator newsletter that is coming out at the end of next week. And also, I'm going to be leading a session about this at the Vermont Alliance for the Social Studies Conference, which is coming up next Thursday. And we have 128 participants in total signed up for that conference. So a portion of those will be attending a smaller workshop about this. And we're just going to be pushing this out into the world.
Thank
I
you.
haven't, yeah, of
Can I follow up on that question?
course.
I'm Kathy Cadwell. I'm a 40-year teacher in the Harwood district.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I know that there'll be, I can think of some individuals who probably won't go to that conference because they won't be able to get the time off.
Yes.
So if we could be in touch, I could send you the individual emails of some teachers who might be interested, including some building principals. I didn't know if you were planning on doing any other large outreach other than the conference, but I could probably give you 10 names of people.
I am always open to any contacts that anybody has that are education related, and Harwood is definitely on the list.
Okay. Okay. So Meg, when we get a copy, what's the best way to write back to you? You're going to send us a copy of some resources and the hard copy, and we can just reply to you that way.
Again, and on the next slide, which just has our contact information, kind of perfectly timed question.
Yeah.
So it has both Eileen's contact and my contact too.
Sorry, Meg, I got rid of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we can't
Oh,
see that right
I
now.
am so sorry.
Sorry about that.
My
But we can get it.
email, I can just type it into the chat.
I put your email in the chat, Meg. So
Oh, perfect.
that's
Awesome.
good.
So that's probably the best way to get in contact with me. And I am creating, just Excel sheets full of interested parties from both the LHS side and the education side.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll send you some, I'll send you some names.
I would love that. Thank you.
Is there a
And
way to find out if anyone from our school district is going to that conference?
we actually don't even know who's coming.
Oh,
So
so you said there were 178 people, so I thought you knew who was coming.
I don't have access to their
Probably
emails.
the organizers, the Vermont Alliance people, would have that information.
But what I can say is that if you are curious, you can reach out to me and I can see whether or not they are receiving any of our current emails. And then I can just see if they're even receiving our just general education emails. And if not, it's a perfect opportunity to reach out to them and make that first contact. I know that some local historical societies have had greater success than others, but I think that if we can just approach the communication from all different angles, we might have better luck.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had a private school here that used to do projects with us, but they've gone out of business, Compass School. So, I'd be curious to find out if any of our other programs are going to be participating.
Well, I am very hopeful. What I'm finding is that there's a lot of initial interest, and then as teachers are finding out more, there's more excitement about it. And so I'm hoping that that is a trend.
So Meg, just a couple of questions from the chat. One was about the total time frame for the All in Vermont project.
Thank you. So the time frame is it starts now, and we are going to fill the map for as long as we fill the map. So we are estimating that we will be receiving entries into 2027.
And a question about the in-person workshop plans.
I actually do not have that date right off the top of my head.
I don't think we have a date for that yet. So we will work on that and we'll get back in touch with folks. It would be in Barry at the History Center, which, as Meg is saying right now, is a construction zone. So not sure.
I would love it to be all 252. I know we've got a couple of gores. We have a few gores that may be challenging. And I also understand that not every single community has a local historical society. So in those cases, I'm kind of calling it loosely nearby history. So there are other local historians that may just be their own history keepers within their own towns, or maybe there's another neighboring town that could help out a town that doesn't have their own LHS. So we're really hoping to remove as many obstacles or barriers to participation as possible.
So thinking of that, should I approach Saxons River, Grafton, and Westminster and try and get together because we're all part of the same school system?
That would be amazing.
I
Why
mean,
not?
I mean,
If you
that
have the
would
time and the
make
availability.
sense. That way we can make sure it gets pushed up.
Yes, I think that would be amazing. I think sometimes it takes a village in all of the different ways, like the proverbial village. And I know that a lot of areas are small, so sometimes we just need lots of different pathways. In terms of an application form or registration form for participation, there is no formal application or registration. In the educator's guide, there are submission guidelines, and so they will have all of the information they need to be able to submit these to us using a very specific form so that we can track it. But no, it's open to everybody, anyone K through 12. And that means homeschoolers. It also means public schools, private schools, all of it. Ah, I would be happy to send that to you directly. And that will be posted online also at the end of next week. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a project in the works for many months now, and to have it, this is really the first soft launch, so to have it live out in the world feels very exciting. And we really are available for any questions that you have and support. And will the guide be electronic? We do have electronic PDF guide versions, and also, this is a great question. Eileen,
Yeah, so those
when they,
those of you that registered with the Jot form, if you put your address in, that is the address we will use to send you a print copy when we have those. It's probably going to be at least a couple of weeks because the print copies will be take a little while to get done, but you can expect that if you did not give us your address in your Jot form, I think most everybody did. We might use your email to hunt you down or ask you for your address. So, um, yeah,
the question,
we can
should
find you.
we at historical societies let our local schools reach out to us? It's really meant to be either direction. So in the education guide, we encourage them to reach out to LHS and local historians and partners. And in the LHS guide, we're really encouraging you to reach out to your schools. So we do have, just as a reminder, a couple of sample emails that encapsulate the All-In project pretty succinctly in the LHS guide. So you can lean on that when you start some of your communication. And there's lots of different people who may be your entrance point into a school. It might not be directly through a teacher email. It may be through a principal, a curricular director, or maybe, and I found this to be true, it may even just be your admin assistant who's like just at the front desk who is willing to put like a note in someone's mailbox. It could be through a PTO because they're always about promoting educational opportunities for their students. So there's lots of different ways to sort of get this information in front of people.
I was thinking that I could go, individual historical societies, we could go to our school board meeting.
Great idea. Totally.
I think once we have the physical document in hand, that would be a way to do that.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you for saying that. Well, yes, exactly. An after-school enrichment program, that could totally be an entry point. Also, I was thinking about it in extension classes, like those who have independent studies, there's so many. I mean, one of the contacts that I actually have at Harwood is the school counselor who's always looking for like internship opportunities, but also just for unique ways to connect students with learning in alternative ways. So there are lots of different ways.
Yeah, thanks so much for your work. It's a super exciting project.
Thank you. Yeah. My excitement is palpable. I can feel it. I almost feel sparkly right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Meg. A lot of work's gone into this, I can see.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Again, if you have other questions, reach out. We'll be talking about this project for the next year plus, probably. So don't worry if there's any other questions you have. We'll be happy to answer them. And again, I think as this evolves too, we'll learn more. We'll probably have some success stories, I think, as we go along about how different schools or different local historical societies did interact with their schools and be better able to give you some great examples as well. And again, we have recorded this, and we'll be sending that link out and the link to the guide and all that good stuff as a follow-up as well.
Perfect.
And also, if you are reading the guide and you're like, man, there's a piece of information that I'd love to have, feedback is also welcome.